I first felt absolutely numb, just absolutely numb, like I hurt everywhere.
I was devastated with the separation. I felt like a failure. It was like my life had ended.
It becomes a war, and the kids are somehow, sometimes I think, the prize.
The anger, the fury, the upset, the grief. And that's it. It's a death.
It's very draining on all your resources, financially, mentally, physically, emotionally.
It felt like you were walking around with an open wound, and which you thought was exposed to the whole world.
It was very clear that the marriage had broken down, and we would be going our separate ways. I felt an incredible sadness to begin with, and I think I went into denial, which is probably what a lot of people do in the beginning. But then you go through those stages of anger and sadness and what have you.
There are 4 stages at least that people go through when they lose a family, lose a marriage. The first one they go through is denial. This cannot be happening to me. Then they go through protest and anger. It's his fault, it's her fault, it's their fault, it's somebody's fault. Then they go through disintegration. It's me. There's something terribly wrong with me. There's something really wrong with the way I've been in my life. And then they go through reintegration. And this grieving process is very difficult, and it takes a lot of emotional integrity and maturity to do it.
You feel such empathy for people because they're mostly decent people going through what they never expected to go through in their lives and feeling emotions they never expected to, and frankly, sometimes behaving in ways they never expected to.
Why should I have to change their routine any more than it's already changed?
At least they do with family. Right now they don't see you very much.
It just racked me. It drained every ounce of energy that I had. It drained it from me.
I felt totally lost. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. Thought that I'd lost an arm or a leg. It was like losing a limb.
I almost felt like I was going to go insane. I really honestly thought I could go off the deep end. It hurt so much.
It was very, very emotional time for me. I was quite distraught, you know. I had high ideals about family and keeping the family together, and it just seemed like it wasn't going to work.
They're your responsibility. You deal with them, and I'll talk to your lawyer.
Breakdown of a family and the breakdown of a marriage is number 2 on the stress list of 11 items. So it's right next to the death of a spouse. It's the big one. So what you have to know is that it's almost like you have to go into a marathon to handle stress.
When the anger got really too bad, I went out and I cycled to burn off the energy that was being built up inside of me. It was like a kettle with the lid on, and the steam was just going to let go.
I coped with it by personally seeking out therapy, just to have someone to talk to, and relying on my friends.
I had some friends that had already been divorced, and we talked about it constantly. I mean, people don't realize this. I do renovations, but people don't realize that guys on the job site just don't talk about women and beer. We're very supportive of each other, and we talk about emotions, and I couldn't have got through without the guys on the job site.
It's not cut and dry. You think it's going to be a logical process, and it isn't. In hindsight, you can see some kind of progression, but when you're involved right in the middle of it, it's all confusion.
I want to see my
Everything
kids.
is you. Everything
I don't want
revolves
sole
around
custody.
You can't raise
Your
our
emotions
children.
do interfere with your decision making, and there's ways of looking at the situation after the fact. The farther down the road you get, that you can begin to see yourself. Really, what you tend to do is just see the other person's wrong. I mean, you just see it all, in terms of what they've done, and you're the innocent somehow. Or so it takes a while to see, what was I doing in this relationship? I mean, we're two people here, and there were two people making mistakes. It takes some distance, and I think that's where counseling can be a terrific help.
Remember, you're not alone in this. Okay, you've got your family, you've got your friends. That's important. You're not alone.
I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had the counseling. I firmly believe that counseling is like going to a general practitioner when you've broken an arm, that when you can't function, something is broken and you need help. And even though it isn't visible on the outside, you certainly feel it on the inside.
I want sole custody of my daughter. I want a divorce from my wife, and I want her out of the house as quickly as possible. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care if I take a second mortgage. I want her out.
If people get stuck in the second stage of the grieving process, which is the anger and protest, they should go for therapy. Because if you're stuck there, you can't get yourself out. You need someone to kickstart your grieving. And then that's what therapy is about. It helps people grieve their losses.
The route to go, because as a starting point, it's best for both parents to be involved if it can be. And
I think it's important that a family law lawyer be sympathetic to the issues of family law, the tragedy that's happening in these people's lives and in the lives of their children, and to help on that front where they can, but recognize that a person isn't paying you to be their therapist, and to ensure that they're getting support elsewhere, whether it's from friends or family or from third-party professionals.
You take a lot for granted. You take for granted that it's going to be a different, your life is going to change, which it does, and it's going to change for the better. I'm free now. Well, you're not. You have obligations, you have ties, and strong ties. To my ex, to help her maintain her lifestyle and help her maintain the well-being of the children.
It's not unusual that a couple, the two people are at very different stages. You know, the person who is perceived as wanting the separation more, they're miles ahead of the person who's just had the bad news dropped upon them.
People go through enormous amount of grief and stress, and they have to be up for it. They have to create new habits. Physical release, some people cry and yell, some people do a lot of physical workout. You need a new support system, people who can tolerate all the levels and stages of your unhappiness, of your anger, of your irrationality. And you have to build the awareness that this will go away, but not right now. And you have to let yourself feel a little bit of the grief every day. Oh, I wish it had worked out. I wish I had done things differently. And then you have to slowly accept, but this is the way it's going to be.
Am I being nuts about this? I mean, he's not a bad guy.
I kept thinking the best thing would be if this marriage could come back together again. So I left that option open probably much longer than I should have for my own sanity's sake. It took me a long time to say, this is really over. Nobody's coming back here. Look at the behavior. This is not going to happen. Once I finally got through that, there was a tremendous sense of release and freedom.
I don't think really that you can ever get completely used to the idea of your parents being divorced. You still can't help but wish that they're back together and all happy.
Kids will never find another biological parent. For children, it's a total tragedy when their families divorce, when their families break down. For a child, it's unending grief for a long time.
If anyone gets hurt, it's always the children or child, because the parents don't really get hurt, because they're not the ones that have to live with the decision that was made.
There is no question that children suffer as much as the parents. I'm not suggesting that parties shouldn't separate. Sometimes it's an unfortunate necessity. However, the adults, despite their own pain, are going to have to recognize that the children are feeling a loss of their safe world. They don't understand what's going on. Incredibly, children, even very young children, blame themselves for the separation.
I think the most important thing to tell people when they're getting divorced is to make sure that the kids know that it wasn't their fault, that it is beyond them, and that they need to know that they're so loved.
I truly love my children, and I consistently maintain the relationship. It's an ongoing relationship. It's a cooperative effort between my ex-wife and myself in maintaining some continuity for the kids.
We find that most people are very good parents, and they are very careful to understand the needs of their children. But sometimes in the heat of battle, and that's what it is when they come to court, it's a war, and they forget the good parent that they are, and the court has to remind them, and we do that swiftly. That ultimately is in their best interest.
I want you to know, Mommy and Daddy love you very much. Okay? Big hug.
No matter how angry you are with each other, tell your children how much you love them and to try to be there as much for them as you can, and not to use the children as pawns in this, because absolutely the children need both parents, and they have to be there for them.
I'd like to say to the parents that they really need to show their children that they love them, especially in a time like this, and just give that little extra bit of effort to their children and treat them really well and try to help them along, but don't push them.
I have absolutely no idea what he's thinking of. You know, he's never there before. He was always even late taking you to dance class.
You really have to be very careful about what you say to your children, about how involved you make them in the process. I tried very hard not to use my daughter as a sounding board, so that if something happened that made me really upset, if I couldn't phone and vent with a friend, I would try and work on the stress before she came home, so that I didn't have to take it out on her.
There you go.
I remember my father saying to me at times, "Oh, you're just like your mother." Well, in a kid, put that together. You divorced my mom. Does that mean you're going to somehow divorce me if I'm like my mom? You know, so it's amazing what kids can take on.
Okay, put your seatbelts on, okay?
Parents will claim that they have a right to custody, that they have a right to access. But the parents have to understand that every right has a corresponding duty. And if they want to have the right of parenthood, then they have the responsibilities of parenthood.
So my friends go, "Oh, well, you're so lucky because you get some of the stuff that they don't have." And I'm like, my parents may be a bit more generous and spoil us a bit more, but I go, well, I much rather have my parents back together than be a bit spoiled.
If you care about the kids, then you have to take the time and effort to make sure that they have as consistent a upbringing as they would have had if you hadn't been divorced, if you care about them. And I care about my kids. They deserve a stable